Okay.
We're good?
Yep, when.
All right, and welcome to Mythical Monster Investigations, episode 17. We have been on a long hiatus because, as it turns out, we actually do have lives, which is weird.
That's a
Ha!
lie.
We have some semblance of a life.
My life's
No?
in video games, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, all right, we'll move on from that. And back to where I was going, this is Mythical Monster Investigations after quite a long hiatus, where we're going to be doing a special episode, which I'm naming the Indiana Jones edition. The reason being is that we're going to be looking at one and. Sorry, what?
That's the wrong edition written on the screen.
Oh, well.
Jeez, did I mess up?
You used edition with an A. It's supposed to be.
Oh.
I just looked at it and was like, wait, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess technically it's adding on to the premise.
Look, I'm happy I just didn't misspell it.
That's fair.
I mean, you didn't misspell it, so well done.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, so grammar apart, we're going to be taking a break from monsters just for a bit.
And fix it.
There you go. Well done. And we're going to be looking at an item that Indiana Jones famously went after, and two, that he should have gone after if Steven Spielberg actually thought things through. Yes, I'm saying that. I'm sorry. I'm a fan of Indiana Jones, but let's be honest, only 2 of the movies were good. 1 was passable, and the other 2 were horrible. I'm sorry, it's just true. Does anyone want to disagree with that?
I've never seen any of them, so no.
You've never seen Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade?
Nope.
Oh, you should watch those 2. Those 2 are fun. Maybe that's something we could watch next time. Well, sorry, I'm off topic. But anyway, where was I going with this? So we're going to be looking at these, and what is that?
I'm sorry, I just had to do that because of the typo
What?
I made. I somehow found that.
Join the math. What the hell?
What in the hell?
I'm sorry, since I made that typo, I had to find the first thing I can with Indiana Jones and math.
It could also be an addition, as in adding on. Oh, never mind. I mean, technically, it wasn't a type. Oh, forget it. Anyway, I'm your host, Archimid, along with my co-host,
Shadow or Fox.
And apparently the grammar Nazi of Zed.
The math squad. Apparently, I'm gonna join that.
Where the math squad is going to be taking a special look at mythological items. And specifically, we're going to be looking at 3. The Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny, and my personal favorite, Excalibur. The Holy Grail and the Spear of Destiny because they both have very similar origins and creation stories. And then Excalibur because I'm a huge King Arthur fan and I wanted to do Excalibur. So, let's get started. We're going to get started with the Holy Grail, or the Holy Chalice, which is, as most people know, is supposed to be the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper. It's reported to have supernatural powers, such as healing, granting eternal life, and I think spiritual cleansing as well. Now, this has been a staple in Christianity since the medieval time period, but not since Christianity existed, which we'll get into later. Now, currently, there are 6 objects in existence that claim to be the Holy Grail, which is actually an improvement because there used to be any number. What? Oh, okay. We're not talking about the Bloody Da Vinci Code, okay? Just no. That movie is just no, okay?
I
no.
had
Why
to
would
make the joke at least once.
I'm sorry, but that movie is done. Why would Leonardo da Vinci know anything about this in the first place? Okay, and not to mention all the symbolism that they talk about is common. Okay, you see what you started.
Oh, I had to make the joke at
leaving
least once.
leaving fictional stories alone and going into a slightly truthful fictional story. Now that I think about it, there were at one time as many as 12 Holy Grails in existence, but currently now we've reduced it down to 6. So we've gotten halfway. And the ones that claim to be the Holy Grail are the first one I'm going to talk about is the Valencia Chalice, which I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, the Valencia Chalice, for those looking at YouTube, is an agate cup which is preserved in the Cathedral of Valencia, which attracts several followers to it. It is used in obtaining. It's used to. It's used by. It has been used by the Pope to start a mass. It is a very holy relic, and it was actually at one time traded in payment for a debt to the papal powers. Now, this has no powers whatsoever. If you drink from it, you're not going to have eternal life or anything else. It makes no such claims. However, it is considered a sacred object, and it has been through a lot. It has been reportedly smuggled out of Nazi Germany, out of Spain, out of a dictatorship in Rome, and is fairly old. So, believe it or not, while overly stylized, this is actually one of the more legitimate contenders for the Holy Grail. Now, that sounds weird, right? Because as Shadow R. Fox is putting on top of the screen with Indiana Jones, everyone but Zed knows the famous line, so I'm actually going to try not to spoil this too much. But Shadow R. Fox, you're a little confused by how ornate this is about how it could be a good contender for the Holy Grail, right?
Yeah, because again, I didn't do an in-depth study, but just thinking, okay, the Grail is supposed to be the cup Jesus drank from on the night before he died. That
Yes.
that would have been a Middle Eastern Judean cup during the time. What during? Oh, technically would have been like, I guess, what, 10
33 BC.
33 BC. So that they would it would not have been a wooden cup because wood would have been too valuable of a resource in that area. So it would have had to been a clay or some type of stone or cup.
Yep. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But okay, so don't worry, about not doing the research because that's what I'm here for. So this cup is actually been looked into with great detail, and it's actually 3 different parts. The bottom part was created in, I think, the Middle Ages, and it is literally just an ornate, ugly base. The second layer is a more is a also a medieval golden placement, which is also very modern. But the top part is the actual cup. This is just a plain agate bowl, and believe it or not, it is actually from the right time period, and it is old enough to have possibly been the cup of Christ. Now the question is, it's an agate bowl. Agate bowls are expensive; they're hard to make. Why would this be it? Well, in the Bible, it's not impossible because Jesus, before he was crucified, was staying at the home of a rich man. So theoretically, he could have been presented this cup for drinking, especially because of Passover. But the thing is, even though it's in the right time period, it is possible and from the right area. There's still the problem of why would they have preserved this in the first place? There's no evidence that this cup is actually used by Christ. It's just, it is from the right time period, which is why it has some legitimacy with the church that's used. It attracts many followers, and it's got a neat history behind it in the way people have tried to protect it for its records as early as they have. But we're going to go into the deeper history of the Grail a little bit later. So we're going to move on to the next one, which has been claimed to be the Holy Grail, which is called the Sacrocantino. Now, this one is the more interesting one. This looks like a
Plate.
green dish. Yeah, it's
Uh,
essentially a green
when you first
dish.
gave me that image, I thought this was from like Wicked or from the Wizard of Oz. I thought this was like the plate that the Wizard of Oz ate off of.
Yeah, no. So, believe it or not, this was actually claimed to be the Holy Grail for quite some time and was first proposed to be the Holy Grail by an archbishop. And it was started by Jacopo de Varini. Now, the reason for this is, as we're going to find out with most of these, to attract followers, to attract people to churches, and to kind of give some status and get people to donate money. In reality, this thing is probably Islamic in design and is far too late to be the Grail and far too ornate. So this thing, if it is the Grail, then Jesus chose a really weird plate to do it with. So that's bizarre. So that's contender number 2, which, yeah, I'm pretty much saying that's not the Grail. But I'm going to say that of a lot of these, and I'll explain why later. So next we have the Chalice of Donna Eureka, which I think I butchered that name. But this one is a jeweled black onyx cup, which was owned by a noblewoman who claimed it was the Grail. Believe it or not, I know this is going to shock you two. Are you ready to hear this? Because this is going to be shocking. Are you ready for this shocking news?
Go for it.
Scientists are skeptical that this is the Grail.
Yes.
Mostly because. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking this looked like one of the grails that would have been on that, on that altar with the Templar as one of the fake grails.
Yeah, actually, it probably would be because it's made out of black onyx, and as you can see, is incredibly expensive. I mean, they literally had to make black onyx is not a cheap material to make a cup out of, and it was also the noblewoman couldn't actually prove it in any way, so it's also from the wrong time period. So to say scientists are extremely skeptical of this is kind of an understatement. Now, the next one is called the Antioch Chalice. And this one is probably the most ornate of the possible contenders of the Grail. It has a lot going on. It has an entire little motif around it, it has an entire story told about it. And this thing is silver. It was after researching it, it probably comes from around 500 BC, and more than likely, though, it's an oil. It's an oil lamp. They think more than likely it's an oil lamp.
A little big to be
So
a cup.
yeah, no, it is big to be a cup.
Like
That's
at
why they.
first, well, I was just thinking at first maybe a pitcher or something.
Yeah, no, it's probably an oil lamp based on the time and its shape. It was later added on with more details to make it more impressive, but yeah, it's probably that. Um, the next contender is actually to describe what you were talking about, Shadow Artifacts, the Nantian Cup. And this is actually, as it looks like, a wooden drinking bowl. Which, so this one does not. This one's a bit odd. So this one is not specifically supposed to be the cup that Christ used at the Last Supper. Because, yeah, you're right. It would not have been made of wood. That's just. It's very unlikely it would have been made of wood, and we'll get to that later. But this cup is supposed to have magical powers, and is even said to have healed people before it kind of rotted away, which is why that's all that's left of it now. But it was a cup that was said to be made of the true cross. I'm not gonna lie, I have my doubts, but Who knows? Maybe wood holds up surprisingly well after 2,000 years.
Well, it looked like it's been glazed with something.
I mean, it's possible, but a lot of it is rotted away. But there are some who say if you can manage to hold a little bit of water in it and then drink from it, it will heal you, either spiritually or in reality. So,
Or you get an infection
yeah, that too.
or some type of fungus.
And then we have the sixth and final contender, and this is called the Marian Chalice. And honestly, I questioned this one. Not that it might be the Holy Grail, but honestly, because of calling it a chalice. This thing is about the size of a salt shaker. Like the picture is deceiving for those looking on YouTube. This thing is tiny. Now, believe it or not, this small green thimble-like cup, which is green alabaster, has a very interesting story behind it, where it was actually found buried and hidden inside a statue. Which is where the whole thing with Joseph Arimathea comes in, and that's why they think it could possibly be a contender for the Holy Grail. Again, there's no real proof, and well, the size of this thing would be confusing, but this one goes mostly off the thing about the Holy Grail being used to catch Jesus's blood when he was dying on the cross. So they say, they used a small thimble instead to smuggle it in, which okay, yeah, sure, why not?
Did they say they used his cup to catch his? It's been a while since I read the
Uh,
crucifixion.
okay, so this is where things will get a little odd, but we're going to talk about that a bit more. But I wanted to. This is basically just to show the contenders of the Holy Grail so far. So believe it or not, the first one has the most credibility, as it is actually from the right time period. These others are varied at best. But which one do you guys like the most, and which one do you find is the most ridiculous?
Really, the green one is the one I find the most kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like I didn't even know it was tiny
Yeah,
initially.
it's hard to get a good. It's hard to see just how small it really is, but yeah, no, it is. It is a tiny little thing,
But
and
well, what got me was the color.
yeah,
Just it's green. It's like if I think green back then, I would think like jade or a rare type of, you know, a rare type of mineral or a rare type of gem or something because there wasn't a lot of green objects back then that wasn't like rusted or.
yeah. No, well, again, it's green alabaster, and like okay, probably should have used this image. I'm putting this in the chat real quick so you guys can see just how small this thing really is.
I'll try to get that
Oh,
on real fast.
Yeah.
that's a sample cup.
Yeah. Again, this is why I highly doubt that it's the Holy Grail, but again, it has a very fascinating story of being found locked in a statue and everything else. So apparently someone thought it was important enough to kind of hide it, but I
You know what?
sincerely
I'm wrong. That could have been. That's not the Holy Grail, but that is the Holy Shot Glass. Because it was Passover. They would have wine.
I doubt highly they would have taken
I
wine.
don't think it would have been in a shot glass, but
Okay.
sure.
To be fair, I don't have a great history of alcohol at my disposal, but I doubt highly the shot had been invented yet.
I don't think it had been.
Well, I think this. I think we're witnessing the birth of a shot right here.
So, just to be clear, Christ had a green alabaster shot glass made to invent taking a shot before going before getting crucified. Wow, that actually makes sense.
It doesn't. If I'm about to die the next day, I'm gonna want to take a couple of shots.
Oh God, we might cause every Christian frat house to start taking shots from green alabaster cups. Okay. So, yeah, that's the most ridiculous. So, which one do you think is the most interesting? I mean, specifically look-wise, not history-wise. This has nothing to do with it. I'm just curious.
For me, it's the first one. If they got rid of all the gaudy parts, which is all the part they added, and kept just the cup at
Agate
the
bowl?
top,
Yeah.
because the bowl looked like it's been glazed,
Yeah.
I mean, it probably has.
and it looked like it's polished too.
It probably is.
So it looked for me. It looked more impressive, and it looked like if I just saw the bowl itself, I'm like, yeah, that feel more for that time period.
Good argument. Zed, you?
No, I agree. The first one looks the best.
All
The
right.
biggest issue I have with it is honestly the handle.
I think the strangest one is the green one, not the thimble, but the second
The strangest one is the second one.
because that's I thought that was
Because
like
it looks like a freaking plate.
yeah, or a satellite disc.
Well, it is a plate.
You sure they wasn't getting cable back then? That looked like a satellite disc.
Probably not. I mean, if anything, it was probably a fruit bowl of some type.
I think we found the holy fruit bowl or the holy plate.
Considering it's more than likely Islamic in nature, probably not.
Ah.
Okay, so with that, there is no real relevance to this. I just thought it would be funny in keeping with the theme. We're gonna have 3 rounds of who's that mythical object Pokemon, where Zed tries to show just how weird Pokemon is and relate a Pokemon to first the Holy Grail. So go ahead.
I mean, there are inanimate objects. Even in the original Pokemon, one was made after the things you catch them with. Which made no sense because those were a man-made invention. But in terms of the Holy Grail, and I need to find it so I make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly. Okay, yes. The closest thing, which is in one of the more recent games, is there is a Pokemon that is said to have come about from a corrupted vessel or something? I don't. A vessel itself gained sentience and became the Pokemon known as Ting-Lu, which is Ting-Lu. It's a deer, which you can very clearly see the vessel is its head.
Is it its head or its antlers?
Well, it's antlers. It's antlers.
Basically,
but
it's a deer
head.
with a bowl on its head.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is just saying Pokemon's weird.
Yep. But yes,
Okay.
this is part of a group of 4 Pokemon that essentially sprouted out of corrupted objects.
Yep. All right. Pokemon's weird. Anyone you want to add to that?
Oh no, this is the only one that, I mean, there are other cup Pokemon, but none that are like,
How are there
mythical
other
objects.
cup
Yeah,
Pokemon?
there's multiple cups.
Yeah, there are several cups.
How can there be several cup Pokemon? How many different ways can you make a Pokemon look like a bloody cup?
There is a teacup that evolves into a teapot.
Let me see if I can find them.
You realize the statement you're saying is not normal, right?
There is one that is a matcha container that evolves into a another teacup, a matcha teacup.
Yeah, give me a
Matcha needs a special container.
Yes, it's Japan.
Matcha's Japanese.
Yeah,
I don't know if matcha's matcha is Japanese.
Huh. Weird. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was Brazilian.
No, if it's not
Maybe.
Japanese, then the Japanese have taken it over.
Yeah.
Let me
I mean,
see.
don't get me wrong. I haven't looked into the history of matcha. I don't particularly like matcha, but
I don't either.
I would have thought it was Brazilian.
Give me a brief moment. I can get all those T Pokemons up and in.
I mean, matcha sounds Brazilian, right?
Sort of. I don't know. It might be. I don't actually know where it's from. I just know that it's
I
very
don't know
popular.
either.
I just know it's very popular in Japan to the point where it may as well be Japanese.
Yeah, no, I don't know either, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually care enough to look it up.
Oh, same.
I'm more okay. Seriously, how are there so many bloody cup Pokemon?
Yep, there are the matcha ones.
I'm trying to find the last with the teacup one.
Why?
I don't know. They ran out of ideas in the beginning.
So why not just stop? Like
Because
I don't know.
Nintendo won't let them.
Yeah, because that makes them money.
Because I think if I recall, Game Freak wanted to stop with the
Game Freak wanted to
second-
make other games, but
the second Pokemon was the last one. That's why you fought yourself.
how did
yeah, the second.
All right, it's got a chip in it. How did Disney not sue them for that?
I don't know.
Because technically the cup isn't the Pokemon is the
Yeah, the
goo.
Pokemon is technically in the cup. It's the goo.
Yeah, so I think that's why.
Yeah, I still say Disney sued for less, but okay.
Well, they couldn't sue Palworld, so
Sue what?
the other game that apparently they claim ripped off Pokemon.
Oh. Whatever. Okay, so
So yeah, there's several cups.
So yeah, again, the point I was making with this is Pokemon's weird.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no one was ever arguing that.
Yeah, I know, but every now and again, since I don't really follow Pokemon anymore, I'd like to just remind myself why I stopped. Okay, so that's round one of Pokemon's weird for this segment. We'll have two more rounds where Zed apparently does in fact have ones for the Holy Lance and Excalibur. So
Well,
that's going to be fun.
Easily for Excalibur, the lance was a bit of a stretch.
We're fine with that. Okay, so moving on, and I know I seem to be jumping a bit, but I will be coming to a point. So the Holy Grail, of course, was famously done by Indiana Jones, and this is the next one, which I think that they should have done, is the Spear of Destiny, because there's so much they could do with that, including the fact that the Spear of Destiny was in fact sought by the Nazis. Now, the Spear of Destiny has also been called the Holy Lance, the Spear of Longinus, and the Lance of Longinus. So, lots of names. Now, the most famous version of it, which is currently the image you see on YouTube right now, is the Holy Lance in Vienna and Austria, and it is the one that Hitler went after, and the one that Hitler actually managed to siege when he first took over Austria, starting World War II. Because, as it turns out, Hitler was very interested in gathering magical artifacts, and the Spear of Destiny was the one that he wanted the most. Not unlike the Holy Grail, though Hitler actually was not as interested in the Holy Grail, but we will get into that a bit later. Now, like the Holy Grail, this Spear of Destiny, which we see on the screen, which is wrapped in gold, and it was wrapped in a golden cuff by Charles IV, I believe, and it is the single most famous one, and currently resides in the Vatican as the official Holy Lance. Yeah, it's probably not, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. The other contender, there's a few other contenders. Another contender is the Gerhard Spear, or the Gegard Spear. Zed, how you have a better pronunciation?
Oh no, that was about mine. Was the Gegard spear or something? I don't know.
Yeah, which anyone who's looking at this noticed as it's extremely thin, obviously overly stylized, which it's more than likely a ceremonial spear, so it's unlikely this thing pierced anyone. And Well, it's located in Armenian Church, and it also brings a lot of followers. Now, there's also others, but they're a little hard to come by. There is the Sacred Lance in France. However, this is merely pieces of the lance, which is located inside a big cross, so you don't get a full spear. It's supposed to be pieces of the spear. There's also another in Poland and in Turkey and Jerusalem, which again are all just small pieces of a spear that is claimed to be part of the original spear. Now, the big thing about the spear, the myth behind the spear that pierced Christ, and the reason Hitler wanted it and others, is that whoever holds the Spear of Destiny is said to be able to rule the world. It was held by Crusaders, it was held by Napoleon, Charlemagne, and
think
other conquerors.
I think they even said Alexander the Great got hold of it or something like that.
I think Alexander was the one person who did not get a hold of it.
Okay, was he not the one? Okay, because I remember they tried to say every well-known conqueror in history got hold of it.
Yeah, they don't always like to actually read history about that.
Does that mean Genghis Khan got hold of it?
Probably not.
I mean, he conquered the most out of everyone that we could name.
True, but probably not. But Napoleon, Charlemagne, and other conquerors did. Now, what does the Spear of Destiny and the Holy Chalice have in common? They were both sought by the Nazis, which means that they were both perfect to make movies out of, because the most popular movies of Indiana Jones was where he was fighting the Nazis. So it was right there, Steven Spielberg. You had the perfect way to do a third Indiana Jones movie with the Spear of Destiny and Nazis, and you didn't take it.
No, we gotta do a Dial of Destiny and Crystal Skull.
Yeah, stupid. Like, seriously, why the Crystal Skull? Crystal Skulls were proven to be fake. Like, they're 100% fake as a $2 3/4 bill.
Well, yeah, because
Okay.
the real one are owned by the aliens.
I can hear him coming to strangle you.
So Hitler was more interested in the Holy Lance, while Himmler, the head of the Nazi SS, was more interested in the Holy Grail. Obviously, Hitler did get the spear. The spear's owner. Okay. So obviously Hitler did get the spear. Now, where does this all come from? Okay, so the Spear of Destiny is it's an odd one. So the Spear of Destiny, the original story about the spear doesn't actually come from the Bible. In fact, Longinus isn't mentioned in the Bible. It is mentioned that Christ is stabbed in the Bible, but the story of Longinus about Christ's blood hitting his eyes and curing his cataracts comes from an apothecary tale called the Gospel of Nicodemus, which is non-canon to the Bible. This is the one that mentions the name of the spear holder, and that's where the Lance of Longinus comes from, which again is not actually part of it. So, yeah, the Apothecary Gospels are one of many Gospels that are said to be written by apostles and everything else, but unlike the Bible that we have today, they've never been confirmed. So they couldn't actually confirm that Nicodemus wrote this, which is why it's not canon. Now, the origin of the Grail is a bit more colorful. The Grail, the first mention of the Holy Grail, doesn't come from the Bible, doesn't come from an apothecary gospel. It actually comes from a poem written, it actually comes from a French poem called Percival, the Story of the Grail. And then that is the one that brings up the hunt for the Holy Grail, the quest for purity because of it. It is a very old French poem, and oddly enough, it actually wasn't finished and later manufactured, but it was one that Hitler was absolutely obsessed with because he saw himself as a type of Percival, a holy knight. Which, yeah. No. Why is Fox Machina's Percival here?
Percival, Holy Knight, Avenging Crusader. I see where you're going with this argument. I got it. That's what Hitler was going for right there. He was aiming for it.
Percival was not an avenging knight.
I mean, it would have been more interesting.
Which also led to other story, which Percival, the story of the Grail, was very popular and led to other stories like Parfasal, which was another story hunting for the Grail. There were about 6 or 7 novels that spun off from that, where Percival, whatever pronunciation, mostly French or German, would be hunting the Grail. And this is the first time the Holy Grail was ever actually mentioned. Now, most of you are probably wondering, well, then, wait, how does this become the legendary Cup of Christ? Well, there's a couple of reasons. To look at it, one of the most famous people who believed this, one of the reasons that it became basis for the since we're talking about this as an Indiana Jones edition, let's talk about the actual real hunt for this. The Nazis did hunt for the Holy Grail, and it was actually headed up by a man named Otto Wilhelm Rahn. Now, Otto Wilhelm Rahn studied, he got a college degree in philology or language, and he did search for the Grail. He's actually considered to be the real Indiana Jones. He saved up money, he got an apartment, and he genuinely did look for the Grail. He actually printed a book called Crusade Against the Grail, which got Himmler interested as he believed that he could find him. Now, this man, what he believed that Percival, he was a way of telling a true story, specifically about a religious group of knights called the Cathars, which was a religious sect who had some interesting beliefs, which we don't need to go into. But the Cathars eventually were excommunicated and they were slaughtered. And this man believed that the story Percival was talking about a Cathar stronghold called the Fortress of Montessugar, and that they had a treasure, essentially similar to the treasure the Templars were said to have before they were slaughtered. And that treasure, this man believed, was the Holy Grail. And, well, to be fair, this man did find the castle, and he tried searching for it because he came up with a very good story of how the Cathars could have gotten out and hidden the Grail in a different place. But slight problem with that, he never found it, and Himmler was getting rather annoyed, and he had a few things going against him. He allowed himself to be voted into the SS just because he wanted to find the Grail. He published a second book, which was then given heavy anti-Semitic tendencies to it, which he ignored again on his quest to find the Grail. He later committed suicide because Himmler became more and more impatient with him, and unfortunately, he had a few secrets, which you two both know about the SS. Well, his secrets were that 1, he was a homosexual, and 2, he was actually Jewish on his grandmother's side. And he was an SS officer.
It's the perfect cover. They never suspected.
Yeah, so bottom line, he kind of took his own life. Yeah.
He should have made the biggest joke and just the last day showed up in the most Jewish gayest outfit he had available just to screw with them.
Yeah. But he instead went to someplace with a bottle. I think he just froze to death with a bottle of whiskey or something. I forget exactly how he died, but he basically committed suicide by freezing to death.
Oh, so he went to Siberia.
The German
kidding.
version of it, but yes, kind of.
Okay, I don't know what the German version is. I was just making a stupid Russian joke.
Yeah, I figured, but no, it's not that far off.
Okay.
So yeah, and obviously, Himmler thankfully never found the Holy Grail. But that was the real Nazi looking for that. So they both looked for two objects. And we're going to go a little bit more into their history of these objects after looking at how people have been slaughtered for it. And I'm actually going to take this moment to give Zed another opportunity to show us how weird Pokemon is. So what do you have?
Just
for
to
this
clarify,
Lance
we're doing
Blanc
we're doing the Lance, right? Because we went on another tangent about the cup.
Yes, sorry, but that's just how this is going. But
No,
yes,
I
it's
know.
time for the Lance.
So there is. So Pokemon is not weird enough that they literally just took a lance and put a face on it yet.
I was gonna say.
I firmly believe that they could. The closest thing that in my mind I can get to a lance is one of the more recent Pokemon, which is Surfetched. And that is because it essentially has a leak lance.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. That is the closest that I can think of that we can get to a lance. Anyone who says it's supposed to be a very long sword, I'm sure it is also supposed to be that. I don't care. I don't have many options.
I'll take it.
And if we're talking about a Lance of Destiny, well, Farfetch'd should have evolved from the beginning, so I guess it was only Destiny that had obtained this evolution eventually.
I'll take it.
Well, isn't the leak that is using special, like a guy used that so many times in a battle?
No. Oh no. What you're the evolution method, you have to crit 3 times in one battle for it to evolve.
Yeah.
No, there's just an item that helps with that, but I do know that with Surfetched's leak, I think it's tied to the leak in that if the leak like gets destroyed or withers away or something, it retires from fighting.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, uses the leak as a food source, so a little counterintuitive.
Makes sense.
I think now I have to confirm. Hang on.
Yeah, Pokemon's weird.
I now have to confirm this because I'm pretty sure that. Okay, where is this?
Yeah, because I thought with the leak it had some type of important power.
When this Pokemon's leak withers, it will retire from combat. The leak stock is both weapon and food. So yes. The thing that if it withers away, it will retire from combat, it also eats.
Shoot, there was another Lance Pokemon.
There is?
Yes, holy crud. I saw
Which
it.
one?
Hang on. You'll get it once I post the image of it. Technically the Lance is part of it, but and there's 2 of them, but
Oh, Escavalier. I completely forgot that thing existed.
And that's a bug Pokemon.
That is a bug. That is an armored bug with lance arms.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I completely forgot that thing existed. But yes, that is also a lance one. More literal.
Technically, wouldn't Beedrill have been a contender?
Technically, it's. I thought about Beedrill, but it's literally in the name, Drill.
Yeah, Drill. Plus, it's more so implied. Those are more like needle type whatever, because it gets the move Twin Needle. So yeah, it's not really.
Whereas Escavalier is straight
Whereas
up a knight.
Escavalier is straight up a knight with lance arms.
There you go.
Yep, I completely forgot about that one.
Good to know.
Again, just more literal lance, nothing really related to a Lance of Destiny.
Nope, it works. Like I said, I just wanted to go with Pokemon's weird.
It is.
Okay.
I mean, technically, you're looking at 2 knights.
Yeah.
Would you be able to tell?
No comment.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's get into the history of these things, because there's some. Besides being hunted by the Nazis, these two holy relics did have another thing in common, and that is they were both desired to exist. Now, what I mean by that is that the reason a lot of these popped up, because if you read the Bible, no importance is put on the so-called cup of Christ, the cup used in the Last Supper, or the spear that pierced Christ's side. There is no importance. Even the book of Nicodemus, there's no real importance placed on either of these items. So, why have they become such a big deal? This happened mostly in the Middle Ages, where there was a giant desire for holy relics, where they wanted items that had been with the holy people, like St. Paul's skull or things like that. And anyone who had these holy relics would have pilgrims come to see it, which would generate revenue, and the churches could pay for things, blah, blah, blah. You know, money makes the world go round, sort of thing. Shocking, I know. And because of this, the most coveted items, the most sought after ones, were any items that directly came into contact with Christ. So not only was there a Holy Grail and Holy Lance,
The nails.
there was the nails, there was the cross, there was his. I don't think splinters.
Well,
but,
no, the splinters from the true cross.
Oh yeah, the small fragments of wood from the true cross. There was also Christ's shirt, which is still on display in one of the churches. There was his sandals. Yeah, no, there's an epitome of them. The crown of thorns, so much. Even one where they'd claimed to have actual blood from him. Of course, the most famous, the Shroud of Turin, which might actually be real, but we may cover that in a different video. Now, because of this, the holy relics make a lot more sense. Because of this desire for them, well, that explains why they exist. I mean, the lance makes sense. I mean, the lance literally pierced the side of Christ. So that is a big deal. I mean, it's like today with celebrities, you know, you're able to sell anything a celebrity's touched for an awful amount of money on eBay or other sites because there are people who will pay for that, and it's a little sad, to be honest.
What I'm hearing is I need to start a new market where I stab celebrities with a spear and then sell it on eBay.
That is not what I said!
While you would get a lot of money for those items, I don't think your business would be open very long.
The spear
and you would have a lot of assault charges on you.
Assault? He'd have a lot of attempted murder charges.
I think he would only... No, never mind. I was going to say I think he would only aim for a limb so he could get... But no, he would aim for the middle. He would aim for the heart.
Look,
never mind. You are completely correct.
It doesn't say how much blood need to be on it. It just got pierced something.
That's not better!
Oh, I can corner the market on this.
Oh, God.
Most people go crazy for a celebrity's shoe or tissue. I got that blood on a spear.
This might be my fault in the future.
That'll be the new holy relic. I found the spear that pierced the rock. How can a spear go through a rock? I don't know, but this one found a way.
Actually, the puns work with that, so well done.
The rock bled. It was a magic rock.
Are you done now? Do you have more rock puns?
I'm trying to think if I can find a picture of the rock with a spear.
Can we not? Okay. So yes, the Spear of Destiny made sense. However, the Holy Grail did not make a lot of sense because, again, the thing was, even in the Bible, it wasn't that important. It was never mentioned. Like, literally, it was just a cup that Christ used at the Last Supper. No importance was given to it. Even in the Apothecary Gospel, there was never a mention of it. So why did it become this great relic that people have sought after, that the Nazis literally spent a ridiculous amount of money to try to find?
Well, the cup, but they do mention the activity of the Passover itself with the what was it? Your share with me this bread and you're devouring my flesh. Share with this cup.
Yes, yeah, of my blood. Yes, but again, the cup was not given importance. What
No,
was
it
given
wasn't.
importance was the symbolism behind the cup. But here's the thing: is the symbolism, because as I said, the first real mention of the Holy Grail in Percival, there was no relation to it to the cup of Christ. In fact, in some of the stories, it wasn't even a chalice; it was actually a shining, glimmering stone. So that's interesting. It didn't become the Holy Grail. It was just known as a Holy Grail. It didn't become the cup of Christ until later on when it started being merged with it, thanks to the French writers and the popularity of it. And magic cups is where they got this story about this holy chalice or this magical chalice. And magic cups go kind of a long way back. One of the most famous of magic cups is actually Nestor's cup from the Iliad. Now, Nestor's cup, if anyone's ever read the Iliad, you probably might have missed this because it goes by so fast. But Nestor was an old king. He was a great warrior, but was too old in the Iliad, so he mostly helped out. But he was said to have a cup that was so heavy only he could lift it, and it had a potion in it that helped warriors get well. And for some reason, this line stuck. This cup that was too heavy for anyone else but him to lift. And it was in the mind of several people. And the Iliad, being one of the most famous stories in history, would have definitely been known by French poets and French writers. And this fascination with magic cups has stuck out. Though with most myths, it's not so much the cup, but what the cup contains, the magic potion that it has. In the case of Nestor, based on the description, it was probably a cauldron more than a cup, which makes more sense for preparing whatever medicine. And honestly, if you're going to go with a cup for any type of magical capabilities, the closest you could do is maybe a silver cup, because drinking from a silver cup, it is said that silver, it has some answers and things that could actually help your body's immune system. But to be fair, that is also heavily disputed.
So it's
But
Nestor, not Nestle.
yes.
Okay, because I was looking for a Nestle cup, and I'm like, wait, I had a cup like this. I mean, I got the Holy
Oh,
Chalice in my cabinet.
Nestle.
Yeah.
Nestle.
Nestle. I'm like,
God
oh.
damn it.
Yeah, I'm like, I got a cup like this. It make me
That
feel
is
better, too. You put chocolate, it's what's inside the cup. It's chocolate milk. I know, it made sense. Checks out.
Yeah, no, that you know what? It fits as well as the Grail. So yeah.
Like, I got one of these
Where
in my
was I?
cabinet. People been looking for this for years. I could have gave it to them.
So yes, magic cups, and then later on, the magic cups were translated to holy cups, holy grails, holy chalices, which later became synonymous with the cup from the Last Supper, which merged thanks to the medieval obsession with holy relics, which became the ancient cup, which became the cup of Christ. Now, it is interesting about Himmler searching for it, but that goes more into the kind of religious practices of the Nazi Party, because despite what people think, the Nazis were not Christians. In fact, the Nazis were trying to erase Judaism from the Bible, and Himmler also believed that the Holy Grail was not a Christian cup, but an ancient pagan chalice. So it's a lot. And he even had a fake one made out of gold, which, yeah, the Nazis cheat. What do you want? Because they were actually trying to destroy Christianity and bring it back to a more northern pagan religion, actually having their own Bible about it, which we won't get into, but there is a fascinating documentary about it called The Nazi Bible, which can be found on YouTube. If anyone's curious, I highly recommend watching it. It's an interesting story. But anyway, so this is where the stories of the magical cup and great spear come from, is this want and desire for holy relics and the ancient legend of magical cups that could heal, which probably was the liquid more than the cup. And honestly, it seems to have mostly come from this strange obsession with Nestor's cup from the Iliad, which is one of the most recognized works in the ancient and modern world, even to this day. Now, if these things were real, these two objects, what would they have looked like? Like, let's start with the spear. If real, what type of spear would it have been? Well, the most famous spear that we see, frankly, it's ridiculous. That spear is not a Roman spear. It's a clearly very ornate one with a golden wrap around it because the original spear actually broke because it was rather delicate. It's overly long and it's from the wrong century. So, frankly, it's just not the right type of spear. The spear would have been one of three types. It could have possibly been a pilum, which is the most well-known Roman spear. It is a type of throwing spear, which specifically has a thin hook meant to go through shields and get stuck in the shield, so the warrior has to discard it. Most people who have studied any bit of Rome know this spear. It is possible that this was the spear that Christ was stabbed on. Another possibility is more of a javelin. Now, javelins were used in the early Roman armies, but the pilum largely replaced them. However, we do have some records showing that javelins were kept around as kind of a secondary weapon to be thrown at various times, though it's doubtful that this would have been used to pierce Christ. Now, the one that I think more probable, because we have to remember the soldier who did pierce Christ. Now, we in the official Bible we don't know his name, and the story about the soldier going partially blind has never been confirmed. But the soldier would have been a garrison soldier, meaning he would have been a city soldier, not necessarily a combat soldier. Now, the pilum was specifically meant for the army, for combat. Now, soldiers who were in the city, which in ancient Roman times, their police force was pretty much the army, where they used centurions as a city garrison as the type of early police force to keep the peace. They could have probably been lined up with something called a hosta spear. Now, this spear is much more plain and has a shallow, more classical leaf-like symbolism, leaf-like shape. And this spear would have more than likely been used by a Roman garrison officer who was basically crucifying a prisoner. It's very likely that Christ was stabbed with this type of spear, which ranges about 14 inches long. And as you can see, is incredibly plain. If it still existed today, that's what it would probably have looked like, in my opinion. But Shadow R. Fox, you think the pilum is more probable?
So because I've been trying to look this up with Pontius Pilate, because he was like, while he's regarded as a governor, it seemed like he was more, while he was the because I've been looking up, he's the fifth governor of the Judea province,
Right.
but his position seemed to be more of military than he was a prefect, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, well,
Rather than a actual, like, I know this is Rome and most of the time politicians were military and vice versa, but it seemed like he focused more military than political, and he was sent there as to just kind of administer Roman law, Roman rule over the area. Like, there's been, because if I recall correctly, it's been a long time since I read that part of the Bible. He was sent there because Rome wanted to enforce more of their authority, and they been having a little bit of trouble in that area.
yes.
And they would send a military person to try to deal with any uprising that could be occurring. Because if I recall, one thing when Pontius Pilate got here, he was trying to make sure that there was no uprising about to take place with the Jewish people.
Yes, that's also true. But also remember that people sent to that part of the world were also people they were kind of trying to get rid of. So it was almost like, sometimes it was a bit of a punishment to almost go, look, we don't want to deal with you in Rome, so go take care of this so we don't have to think about you.
But he would have been sent with a contingency of his own troops.
Yes,
Even if he was being exiled, he would have still been sent with honor guard, which would have been military personnel. That's why I'm thinking Pilum, because I'm looking at some of the things he did, and some of the things he did was like some of his operation. He surrounded protests with soldiers dressed up like civilians. But huh. But here's the other thing. I'm looking at some of his history. It seemed like they're hinting that he was a javelin man when ranking up through the military. So, for all we know, it could have been his own jab. He could have kept a contingency of javelins.
Yeah,
But
no,
then they're also referring to the Pelham at javelin, so they can't get their record straight of which they're referring to a javelin, but that would have been a Pelham.
no, yeah, that's why I said that these three are the most likely suspects for him. Again, I think the hostage spear just because it's kind of so you talked about the sort of plain clothes soldiers he had to try to keep the peace. These would have been people to crucify, so they're out in the open, they're meant to be seen. And for more of a ceremonial thing where the pilums were specifically for the soldiers and everything else, a less complicated hostage spear would not be uncommon for a more showy bit of force to be used, if that makes sense.
But see, I can't with crucifixion. They wasn't. I mean, we regard crucifixion as a big deal, but back in Roman days, crucifixion was it was a it was a petty like it was yeah it was an execution, but it was an execution just to say yeah it was the equivalent of them hanging pirates like they did back in the day. It wasn't meant to be a big grandiose process as much as was like yeah this is what's gonna happen to you if you screw
Well,
up.
do remember though, it was still a spectacle. You know, hanging was always a spectacle. You know, there was a crowd and
Yeah,
everything.
but they didn't use golden ropes to hang people.
No, but watching someone die on a cross is not a pretty picture. Because
No,
remember,
it's
the word excruciating actually comes from to be taken off the cross. That's where we get the word excruciating. So this was a spectacle.
the reason I think it was just
I
a
mean,
soldier over a hostis spear was just because I would imagine the hostis would be at the since he said he used the people as like this civilians well use soldiers dressed as civilian. I would imagine most of the actual civilian guard, the city watch, would have been keeping the crowds away, which meant the only people that would have been close by Pontus and possibly the prisoners being executed would have been closer to his guard or military personnel. That's why I assume Pelham.
yeah, no, I get the assumption. My thing again is just the use of weapons. Like nowadays, you don't take like military grade weapons all the time when you're dealing with low end civilians. Like if you're just escorting a prisoner, you're not loaded with military grade weapons. Is my thing. So like the hostage spear would have been perfectly suitable for this, where the pilum was specifically meant for a more advancement on the battlefield. The pilum was a more advanced spear for the Romans, where this is more simplistic. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't know
Yeah,
what
no,
type of soldiers
like
would have been present during his execution because the Bible doesn't mention any.
no, like we're not sure because all we know for sure is that Christ got stabbed, and like I said, that's why I put all three of these here. Is that I believe more than likely it was one of these three, either a pilum, a javelin, or a hosta. I think the javelin's kind of a stretch personally, so it's probably either a pilum or a hosta spear. One of these two pierced Christ, not the overly decorated ornate one that is
Oh well,
currently
no,
in the Vatican.
of course not. No,
No,
it's too
that's
long.
nonsense.
It's way too. It's not a spear that the Romans ever used.
No, absolutely not. It's the wrong type. It's the wrong design. It's just everything about it's wrong. And that ceremonial spear from Armenia is clearly, I don't know what that is. That's just nonsense.
That's someone's arts and crafts project put onto display, as far as I'm concerned, because that's also not a Roman spear.
Yeah, like in reality, that spear was probably melted down years ago. Like it's probably long since gone. And again, the Bible never said it had any power in the first place. But if it somehow survived in some way, it would look like one of these.
I'm
Well, the
banking.
heads of one of these. The wood would be long gone
The
by
other
now.
reason I'm banking more on javelin and pilum over the hostage spear is because who would have been their primary types of enemy? What would have been their enemy in the region? What would have been their primary way of fighting?
Well, they were there to settle the Jewish people, so I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I mean, the people of that region often they fought with range. They didn't often um fight heavily clad. They wasn't heavily armored, and while the cavalry would have been heavily armored, they oftentimes they focus more on skirmishing, hitting,
Well,
retreating,
yes,
hitting,
but
retreating. It,
well, yeah, but remember, Pontius Pilate was there for civil unrest, so what he had to deal with was more
no,
like
but I'm
zealots,
I'm
which
speaking
is
more in terms of the guards. What would they have had to deal with? They probably would have had to deal with raiders or bandits who would try to just take a javelin and chunk at them in the hopes that it would kill them and run off. So I would just imagine that even the guards would have been probably more familiar with peeling those javelins because the easiest way is just chunk a spear at them, chunk one and take the other, and run it through whoever's still charging at you, rather than a spear where you just gotta put your shield up and hope you can block all their shots before they charge in towards you.
yeah, but I don't know how common that was in this time during Judea because
Javelin was very common during this
no
time period.
javelins were I mean the attacks, like
Oh,
because what Pontius Pilate
that
dealt
was
most
very
with.
common, probably.
I remember Pontius Pilate dealing mostly with civil unrest versus actual like attack.
Wasn't one the person a murderer who also got crucified?
Yeah, but like I said, like again, more civil unrest attacks. So like the zealots who would try to assassinate Roman people with elaborate plans, things like that. Like a direct kind of cavalry approach wasn't as common in Judea. Most of the attacks were more almost guerrilla style.
That's again why I'm leaning towards the javelin and the pilums, because that's a skirmishing type weapon which is suited for dealing with guerrilla style attacks for the Romans essentially.
Well, to be fair, most of the Roman armor is suited for guerrilla type attacks usually.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, but so again, it goes with garrison versus soldier. But the question is like how many basically would be was the person who stabbed Christ just an honorary garrison soldier or was he an actual soldier? That would be the real question, and unfortunately, we have no real way of finding that out.
Yeah.
In fact, we have no way of finding that out. It could be either or. So that's what I'm saying. Both of them are possible. And yeah, no, that's about it. So if the Holy Grail, I mean, not the Holy Grail, if the Holy Lance was still around, it would look like one of these. It would not look like whatever the hell those two things are that are on display in the Vatican and that Armenian church. Just no. So then what about the Grail? The Grail, as Indiana Jones' knight famously said, would not be something that would be made of gold. It would be plain. It would be an in dish. It would be like a Passover cup. And Passover cups are still around today because you see, Passover cups, they have to be kosher. So they have to be pure with no articulates, nothing to make them dirty or anything else. So therefore, it couldn't be silver or gold. It had to be something that could basically be purified. And these that are on the screen now, for those of you watching YouTube, are modern Passover cups, which, as you can see, are ceramic, I believe.
It looks ceramic.
Right? I'm not gonna lie, I do not know a lot about Passover cups, but they're usually pretty plain. If we're going to what cup that Christ used, which Christ was crucified the day before Passover, so the cup in question would have probably been plain. An agate cup is not impossible if he was at a rich man's house and he was lent it. It is kind of doubtful. So more than likely it was ceramic or clay. Something very basic though. It could have been a stonework cup, as stonework cups were popular in this time, especially around Judea. But again, it would have been extremely plain. So the Grail probably was in this type of shape, like a cup. agate is not impossible, but again, the question and the problem with the agate cup is why would they have kept this? Like, what possible reason would they have actually had to keep the cup that Christ used? Because the whole point of this is my blood partaken of it is the wine representing his blood. The cup held no importance whatsoever. And Christ was not big on materialism. And Christianity itself is very against idolatry of any type, which worshiping cups and sacred objects, it kind of falls pretty far into that category of idolatry. So I'm pretty sure Christ would not have been overly thrilled with this fascination with a bloody cup. I mean, honestly, it was probably thrown out with the dinner plates and destroyed or rotted away. If it was saved for some reason, we really have to ask why on earth they'd saved this thing in the first place. It's just there's no point in saving this cup. It meant nothing. I mean, even the one in the movie looks slightly better. So, like, I honestly don't know why a cup of a carpenter would still look like that. Like, I guess it is plain looking, but at the same time, the inside of it looks golden. So it's like, okay. But yeah, those are the grails. Before we move on to my personal favorite, anything you guys want to add or any questions you have about the grail or the spear of destiny?
If only they could have made it easy and just, made it like a mug that say Jesus cup or number one Messiah or the best God, something along that line. We would never lost it.
All right, fair enough.
So what you're saying is if only they had a label maker.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay, so for future leaders, label your cups. It'll save a lot of confusion.
Yes.
Okay. Zed, anything?
No.
Thank you.
Not.
I appreciate it. So, now we're going to move on to one of my personal favorite magical items in history. And what, if Steven Spielberg had any brains, he should have done a movie on Excalibur. I mean, come on. How cool would it have been for Indiana Jones to look for Excalibur? It would have been awesome. Now, of course, as many people know, Excalibur is the magical or legendary sword of King Arthur, the most famous king of the Britons, and most commonly is shown as a medieval sword, which, not really. So, Excalibur, or Tale of King Arthur in itself, is a Welsh tale, and in the Welsh, it's not actually called Excalibur. It's called, I'm going to butcher this, Cadafwich. Now, Cadafwich later on becomes Caliburn, which later on turns into Excalibur. What Excalibur essentially means is steel breaker. So this was a sword so powerful it could break other swords, or break steel. That was the claim. Now, King Arthur's legend had a very heavy French influence. The French got a hold of King Arthur legend and they added so much to it. Kind of like the original in fact the story of the Holy Grail was added by the French author. In the original Welsh tales, King Arthur never went after the Holy Grail. Like, that quest never happened. In fact, the reason King Arthur left with Mordred in place was actually to go and fight a Roman emperor who was trying to take over Britain. So less interesting. Which the French influence makes sense because I always wondered why in a British tale, the greatest knight in the world, Lancelot, was French. Now I understand, because Lancelot was also fake. He was added in by the French, along with Guinevere, because the French, for some reason, love tragic romantic stories. Like, I don't understand that. Why? Why?
Sex
What is with
sells.
their... Yeah, but it's almost like Romeo and Juliet. They both end up horrible.
Sex sells.
Apparently, happy endings don't.
Yeah, do you know how many of those erotic novels and stuff that all the women read in bookstores always have like some type of sad or tragic ending?
Yeah, fair enough. It just reminds me that 1001 Arabian Nights was made popular in Britain because it was translated and then updated into nearly a pornographic book by Sir Richard Burton, who actually brought us the Kama Sutra. I guess people have always wanted porn. Okay, good to know. Where was I going with this?
The sword in the stone.
Yeah, moving on. So King Arthur, though, despite French influences, going back to the original Welsh tale, he probably was based on historical figures. Could have been a Roman general or a Welsh or Celtic chieftain or someone to that thing that lived around like 500 BC or so. I'm sorry, 500 AD. At least I think I might be getting that date wrong. Horrible with dates, but there are people now. One of my favorite movie of all time is King Arthur with Clive Owen. They say that most historians agree that King Arthur was based on a real person. That is unfortunately not true. Some historians think that he was based on a real person. By the way, Shadow R Fox, too early for that image. Um, yeah, too early for that image. So, however, going to Excalibur, Excalibur was actually first described in the passage which Shadow R Fox now has called "The Dream of Rohambi." How did Google pronounce that again?
I think you got Rahan beat.
Yeah. Okay. So Excalibur was stated. So the tale that they gave for Excalibur was stated like this. And actually, Shadow R Fox, I'm going to have you put the image of that sword I told you about on now, real quick, if you don't mind.
Mm, yep.
Okay. So this is the description. Then they heard Cador, Earl of Cornwall, being summoned, and saw him rise with Arthur's sword in hand, with a design of two chimeras on the golden hilt. When the sword was unsheathed, what was seen from the mouths of the two chimeras was like to flame of fire, so dreadful that it was not easy for anyone to look. So, according to this, Excalibur was actually said to have a golden hilt with two chimeras wounding on it to the very top. And for those of you who could get a good look at this, you can see that this hilt has two chimera or two dragon heads at the very top. And it is in the style of a short Roman gladius sword. So, this based on this kind of description of Excalibur, Excalibur could have possibly looked like this. So, interesting enough, that is what Excalibur could have looked like. Now, for those who are diehard art fans, it would pay me not to mention that there is some dispute with Excalibur and that there are two different swords. One is the sword in the stone, and the other is Excalibur. The sword in the stone is said to be another sword that Merlin placed in stone for Arthur to draw to prove that he was king, where Excalibur was the sword that was given to him by the Lady of the Lake, which was Steelbreaker that could defeat enemies and everything else. Later on, the two became merged. It was a whole thing. Now, the Sword of the Stone does have some precedence, and there are actually a few real swords in the stone. One such, which is on the screen now, is Saint Galgano's sword. Now, Saint Galgano was a knight who had trouble with his faith, but later on became a full, really got into Christianity, and so much so he claimed that he was at one time praying to an angel and was told, I forget what he was told, but something about his faith saying it would be more likely for his sword to split a stone than something happening. And he drove his sword into the stone, and to his surprise, it split and went through, and it actually remains there to this day. This image is a real sword and a real stone, which has an entire church built around it that you can see to this very day, though You're gonna have a hell. That is not the Disney Sword in the Stone. Really?
They're never gonna get that dang thing out.
It's not. There's no sword connected to it. So Saint Galato's sword is very real.
I mean, his went through a rock. That one went through anvil. One's more impressive than the other. That's all I gotta say.
One's real.
Well, the other one could be real. We just haven't managed to pull it out yet to confirm.
Yeah, I think Mickey pulled it out once.
I think Mickey will kill the guy who tried to pull it out.
So yes, Sword of the Stones does have some interesting notions. There was actually another Sword in the Stone found in a river, I think in England, where they found an ancient medieval sword driven into a stone, and they had a hell of a time getting out. They're not exactly sure how it got there, though they think someone somehow threw a sword. It fell, and after years, eroded away until it got into the stone. Though that's a theory. No point to that. Just something interesting. So, before we go into what Excalibur might have actually looked like, we've talked about some of the inspirations. Let's take a look at Pokemon's sword answer. Because apparently, according to Zed, this was easy.
Oh yeah, there's several swords.
Oh, God.
There's an entire evolution line of swords.
How is there an entire evolution line of swords?
They made a ghost sword.
Yeah.
What?
I'm not kidding. That was the initial one that came to my head. Do you have pictures of all of them?
I'm getting the other one. You talk Aegislash is the one you.
Yes, Aegislash is the one that I am thinking of. That is.
I'm gonna assume the blade form.
Either. I mean, yeah. I mean, its body is a sword. The shield is an accessory.
Ooh, and I'll get the ones.
But no, there is an evolution line. It is one sword that evolves into two swords that evolves into a sword with a shield.
Let me get all of them up in here.
How am I even supposed to respond to that?
I don't know. It also is said that anyone who wields it, it drains their life force. Let's also not forget the legendary Pokemon Zacian, which is a dog wielding a sword.
That's one's a little bit more Excalibur because that's the one.
That one is a bit more Excalibur-ish.
Because don't you find the relic of the sword in a stone?
Yes, you find the rusted sword on like an ancient pedestal. And it is rusted and broken. And the very last one there is very similar to the first one we looked at, Ting Lu. This one is Chien Pao, which is a cursed sword that, looking at its dex entry, the hatred of those who perished by the sword long ago clad itself in snow and became this Pokemon. And there are all of the swords that make up the Aegislash line. So yes, there are many swords.
Okay. Again, Pokemon's weird. So,
Ironically, the sword one is one of my favorites because I have used it and it is very useful.
good to know. All right, moving on. So let's have some fun and talk about, again, archaeologists are unsure if King Arthur was real. Personally, I'd like to believe he was based on a real person, but I'm a big King Arthur fan, so I admit a bias. Now, if he was real, let's say he was a Roman general, then he would have probably had a variant, either ornate or not, of a Roman sword, the gladius. So that's why that actual twin dragon sword that I showed earlier, if he was a Roman general, is not out of the range of possibilities because it is the right size, and some of them were very ornate. So it could have been a short sword, would have been good for cavalry, which in these days, King Arthur's basis for the Roman general or Roman cavalry officer would make sense. Now, if it was a chieftain, he would have probably had a more Celtic style of sword, which is known for the straight blades and rather unusual handles. These were, as I kind of call it, the jumping man handles because they have kind of a widespread. They have two U's on the top and bottom and a little ball in the middle at the hilt. So, it, looking at from certain angles, it can kind of look like just a man standing in an X position. Which, yeah, Celtic swords are not my favorite as far as design goes, but they're interesting enough. Some other people claim that Excalibur was actually based off the sword of Charlemagne, uh, Joyous, which can still be found in the museums today. I forget which museum, but this is what it currently looks like. However, this is not the sword that Charlemagne would have used. While it may have some of the original base metal, this sword has had its hilt, its handle, its hilt, and even its blade replaced. So there's nothing about that's original. So based on the time period, Charlemagne's sword would have looked more like a Carolingian sword, which looked more like this, closer to some of the Viking swords, though it is not the same style. It's more of a transitioning sword, similar to the Vikings, but not the same. It would have been ornate, but it would have been in this style, most likely a one-handed sword. Now, the reason people think that Joyous might have been the inspiration for Excalibur is that many think that Charlemagne inspired a lot of King Arthur with his knights around the court and possibly even the Round Table. But again, that is mostly theorized. So, nope, that's about it. That is three magical items throughout history. Two of them have no importance whatsoever and were pretty much created because the church wanted to have items that associated with Christ so they get more people to come, which it was also kind of a status symbol, which really goes against Christianity when you think about it, because it's almost idolatry worship. Because these things were often
Almost.
set up. Yeah, it is kind of idolatry
It
worship,
straight up
and
was. Yeah.
yeah, and that's a huge no-no for the Christian faith.
Oh, don't
So
tell the Catholics. They get really picky about their idols.
yeah, I know that's why a lot of people criticize the Catholics for this reason.
Because it isn't it primarily just the Catholic who put a lot of huff and puff in like the relics of saints and the relics of what could be Jesus relics and stuff like that.
There are a few others that do it, but yeah, it is primarily the Catholics.
Yeah, I only know the Catholics as the one
Yeah, no,
who.
the Catholics are big on this. They like they like their kind of idols, for lack of a better word. I mean, even their vindication of the Virgin Mary. I mean,
Yeah, that
they'll
always
pray to
struck me as
angels
odd.
and the Virgin Mary, which the Bible specifically says don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes the Catholics can forget their own rules, unfortunately. And Excalibur, I'm not gonna lie, I just like it. So these are two things, and I hope you guys had fun learning a little bit about the history of the Holy Relics and Excalibur. And we definitely learned that Zed, we're making you watch two Indiana Jones movies.
I'm fine with that.
Yep, that's happening. We're not going to make you watch the other three because those were terrible.
We're
Well,
not, we're not gonna let them see the Crystal Skull.
I was actually going to say Temple of Doom is not horrid, but when compared to the Crystal Skull and Death's Dial of Time or whatever, it's at least passable.
Temple of Doom is fine.
I mean, it's not horrid,
Everyone
but
like to dog on it, but I'm like, compared to what we got with the Crystal
yeah,
Skull
no,
and
that's what I'm saying.
Dial of
Like
Time.
Temple of Doom used to be the worst one, but it was never bad. Like
Well,
Temple of Doom was an acquired taste, but was never just downright bad.
It's
That's
worse when you're comparing it to the first one where they're going to look for the Ark of the Covenant, and then the
yeah.
third one where they're looking for the Holy Grail.
Yeah, no, it is far worse than that. Like, it's worse by comparison. But even like, I'm going with just as a standalone movie, it's not bad, though the female love interest is a little annoying.
Yes. As
And
is the kid sidekick.
yeah, Short Round could be a little obnoxious at times too. Not horribly obnoxious, but definitely like 80s kid obnoxious.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
I'm
Zed, you remember him. He's the same kid from, he's the Asian kid from the Goonies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Only he talks more. A lot
Okay.
more. Yeah. But
I'm
compared to
assuming
the
he doesn't have the quirk of weird yet seemingly useful inventions.
No.
He does drive.
but no inventions.
Okay, just being able to drive does not help.
Especially since he only really does it in one scene.
Okay.
And Crystal Skull was bullshit. I'm sorry. It was just like, I don't know what the hell that was. I mean, I saw that in theaters. What a waste.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You watched that in theater. I saw that on TV. I'm like, okay, it's all right. It's all right only because I'm watching it on TV. I can go and do something else.
Yeah.
I don't have
Lucky
to like
you.
sit there and watch it, and concentrate on it. I can just make something while I'm doing it, or
Yeah,
work.
no, I was watching it. I regret it.
At least it didn't go in for Dow of Destiny. I heard that one was really bad.
Yeah, I watched that on Disney Plus. That was horrid.
Is it even worth the time to watch on Disney Plus?
Not really. I'm not
Okay.
gonna lie. Like, I had to stop and come back to it like twice. I will admit, the very first like 10 minutes of the movie is actually pretty good.
Of
Especially
course.
with the CGI. The CGI they use on Harrison Ford is actually pretty good, but the bad thing is Harrison Ford is talking, so you've got like 30-year-old Harrison Ford with like 70-year-old Harrison Ford's voice.
I was just
So
thinking, of
it's
course, you would like the
mismatched.
beginning because the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, spoilers, his son is is not among the living anymore.
Oh, that's actually not told to close to the middle of the movie.
Oh well. Either
Which,
way, that I'm like, oh, of course, that's why Archimage like they're killing everything from the previous movie.
yeah, but even that they do it so like it's like
Half,
a second mention and it's just thrown away.
yeah, they
And then
don't
I'm
mention
sorry, the female they have who I don't know why
his
like
goddaughter
is in
or whatever.
yeah, she's not entertaining. Sorry, I don't
No,
know how she is as an actress, but she's not entertaining in this movie.
I
Like,
recall all the reviewers say she came off as a pill.
yeah, she's shoved in. She's not a particularly interesting character. She's not a charming rogue. She's not charming at all in this
And
movie.
if
I don't
I'm
know
not
about how she acts,
mistaken,
but
aren't
no.
they trying to? Wasn't in the movie they were trying to push her as the new Indiana Jones to replace,
Yes.
which kind of kills me because I'm so I know you don't like Crystal Skull, but I felt Shia LaBeouf had a better chance of being Indiana Jones than she did.
No, I would agree with that. Like, look, it's nuts. I know Shia LaBeouf came pretty nuts, but I've been saying, like, if you're gonna do another Indiana Jones movie, do what James Bond did. Just replace the actor.
Yeah,
God, Hollywood used to do that all the time. I don't know when we got afraid of replacing actors. I mean, for God's sakes, Harrison Ford is like, isn't he in his 80s or something?
I think he is in his 80s.
It's like, God dang, let the man go home. Enough already.
And like they say in Wolverine and Deadpool, you're gonna be doing this till you're 90.
I know, and like they're freaking serious about it too. But
I can't wait for the next Indiana Jones where we see Harrison Ford in a wheelchair or in a hospital bed. Da, 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 da. They got like the nurse using the whip to carry the bed across. Indiana Jones and the catheter.
Oh God.
Indiana,
Actually, yeah, you can pull it off. He's looking for the Fountain of Youth.
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Suppository.
Oh, for God's sake. I need Indiana Jones and the Holy Bedpan.
I would actually watch that Indiana Jones. Like if he just like the whole premise of the movie, he think he's going on a giant grand adventure, and it's like no. He's just a delusional old man on his deathbed, and these random objects are the new magical relics in his head.
Zed, I promise you the movie we want you to watch is not like this.
I believe it's not.
I think he would be disappointed that it's not. That's actually sound better than the last two Indiana Jones movie we got.
Well, we're not going to make him watch the last two Indiana Jones movies. Okay, we promise. We're only going to make you watch the two good ones. And if you're interested, maybe Temple of Doom. But not the last two. The last two were awful.
I kind of want to see Indiana Jones and the Holy Bedpan.
Oh God, what have I started?
I don't know.
That's the thing. There are so many objects that Steven Spielberg could have. Like, Steven Spielberg could have looked over so many objects, like the Staff of Moses, other things. Like, why go after a crystal skull?
Well, they didn't do the Staff of Moses, but they did that random staff to find the Ark of the Covenant in the first one.
Yeah, bollocks. Still, why crystal skulls? Like, why the alien thing? Was it just because he missed working on E.T. and wished he'd gotten a sequel?
Okay, if Crystal Skull had been a crossover for E.T. as well, that would at least been more interesting.
I mean, well, at least would have been funny.
I would love to see E.T. do the phone home with his finger, and then Indiana Jones pull out his gun and shoot, like
That
the
would
guy
be
with the whip.
That would be hysterical. But yeah, no. Okay, we got off topic on this. I forgot we're still recording.
Yeah, no, we're still going.
Yeah, this hasn't ended.
Okay, so
People have just been listening to you two talk about Indiana Jones for the last 20 minutes.
It is the Indiana Jones edition, so
yeah, so Steven Spielberg loved two of your movies. The other three sucked. I'm sorry.
keep going. I want to see Indiana Jones, the Holy Bedpan, Indiana Jones, and the Lost Ark of the pill bottles. Indiana Jones and the Comatose Jones. Give it to me all.
With that, I guess if you're interested in monsters and myth, feel free to check out Probable, Possible, Plausible, and Explanatory Guide to Monsters and Myth, available on Amazon and other places where you can buy books. Thank you for joining us for this special edition. Next time, we're getting back to monsters. I believe we're going to be starting with Greek monsters. I think it's the Sirens, but I don't remember for sure. So join us back where we get back to monsters and not talking about Indiana Jones looking for bedpans.
That would be amazing.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
See you guys next time.
Later.
Bye.